What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today we're going to continue the rant series as we look at the AL West. Now, this is not going to include the Houston Astros as they will get their own video. So don't you worry about that. That will be coming out shortly. But today we are going to look at the LA Angels, Oakland Athletics, Seattle Mariners, and Texas Rangers. So we will start off with the LA Angels. And the first bullet point is wasting Mike Trout's career. Mike Trout is arguably the best player in the history of baseball, definitely the best player in modern day baseball. And yes, he keeps getting hurt, I understand that. But Trout is a once in a generation type of talent. The Angels have done absolutely nothing with that talent. They literally just sit around and they miss the playoffs playing 500 ball every year. They go out there and every move they make doesn't seem to work out. So they go out, they sign Rendon, doesn't work out. They get so many different players, but they don't get the right guys. They don't get players who can help out with Mike Trout. They get players that they think will work, that work in other systems, but they don't work out. And it's just Trout can't play forever. So the real question is, can they actually get to the promised land while Trout is still in his prime? Now, one player that they did take a chance on was Shohei Ohtani, but they are currently wasting his career too. Ohtani's an amazing player. He's the best two-way player in a long time in the history of baseball. And right now, the Angels are doing nothing with him, too. They have Trout and Ohtani, arguably two of the top 10 players in the sport. But they're doing nothing. They can't figure out what to do. When you have two guys there, you essentially have a 25-man roster, or a 27-man roster, I should say, because Ohtani fields two spots. He serves as a starter and a DH. So the fact that you can't fill anything with those other 25 spots, and yes, I understand Jared Walsh is good, but you can't do anything with these guys. It's just disgusting. Now, they took a chance on a couple of free agents, like I mentioned before for Trout. One of them, Albert Pujols. They gave Albert Pujols, who was ancient, a 10-year contract. Now, they did recently get rid of him in the 10th year of his 10-year contract, but he was just a waste of payroll for just over 9 years. That money could have easily been used to spend on anyone but Pujols, and you probably would have gotten a better investment. Now, yes, Pujols will be in the Hall of Fame at some point, probably 5 years after he retires. And yes, Pujols will, it will say LA Angels on his name, under his, plaque, but was he worth the money? You could have spent it on anything but Albert Pujols, and it would have been a better investment. Josh Hamilton. Similar to Pujols, they threw a checkbook at Josh Hamilton, and it failed miserably. This one's more of a sad story than the Pujols one, but, I just had to bring it up. Now, at one point in time, the Angels were bought and owned by Disney. So, that in and of itself is embarrassing. It makes you shake your head and say, really? You were owned by Disney? So, and it's not like this was in the 1960s. No, this was recently. This was in the 21st century. They were owned by Disney. So, there's nothing more to say than you were owned by Disney. That's just dumb, gross. Bubba Harkins. Now, Bubba Harkins, in case you don't know, he's the guy who allegedly supplied all these pitchers around the league with, banned sticky substances. So, he's kind of at the heart of the whole scandal that's been going around since probably 2019 when Trevor Bauer made a big to-do about it with Garrett Cole. But Harkins is definitely one of the big guys, probably the big guy. He made his own substance. He would sell it to opposing pitchers. He was fired by the team, but still, this isn't necessarily a knock on the Angels, but he worked for the Angels when it happened, so I have to include him. He could have single-handedly helped to destroy baseball. So we'll have to see what happens with this whole scandal, but yeah, he's brought up a lot of names too. Now we have the Oakland Athletics leaving Philadelphia. Yeah, I get it. Philadelphia cannot support two teams, but I had to put it here. There's no way the Philadelphia area can support two MLB teams. So, treatment of Kansas City. When they left Philadelphia, they went to Kansas City. They played there for 12 years, and in all of those years, they were awful. The team stunk. So they gave Kansas City nothing over 12 years. They gave them all this hope. They made all these comments about how, we're never going to leave Kansas City. We're going to stay in Kansas City forever. We're never going to leave. And then they left after a dozen years. So just I understand that that's an owner being greedy, but it just, you can't respect that. Farm system for the Yankees. Now, in the 60s, when they were in Kansas City and towards the end of their time in Philly, this team basically served as a feeder for the Yankees because the owner of the Athletics was friends with the owners of the Yankees. So any player that they got that was pretty good, they would trade to the Yankees. Roger Maris is a big one that sticks out. So it makes you wonder what on earth you're doing with your spare time. I don't understand why they were doing that kind of stuff. Just, it's ridiculous. The Coliseum. The Coliseum is far and away the worst stadium in probably all professional sports in the United States, at least. It's a dump. It's bad. It's old. It smells. There's sewage everywhere sometimes. So the Coliseum, they need to get out of Oakland. So that's, of course, an ongoing discussion, but it's such a bad stadium. Over-reliant on sabermetrics. Now, if you guys are fans of the channel and you've watched baseball videos, you know I am a fan of sabermetrics. I like this stuff to an extent. I like having a guy who can hit 300 versus the home run or bust guy. But the Athletics go and they invest every last penny in sabermetrics. There is such a thing as being too reliant on sabermetrics. And I mean, simply put, you can't be too reliant on sabermetrics because it has not worked out in the past. And I mean, we've seen it with this team. Will it continue to work out now? It's tough. I mean, sabermetrics are definitely something that they're new and they are revolutionizing the game, but no. Now, I should have written down another point, but I'm just going to mention him. Charles Finley was one of the worst owners in baseball. I believe he was the one who took the team from Kansas City to Oakland, but he was a cheap son of a gun. He basically did whatever he could to spite the Athletics dynasty. It appeared in the 70s, so I just have to mention him. Now we go on to the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners, I mean, wasted talent. Ichiro, Ken Griffey Jr., Randy Johnson, Felix Hernandez. With those guys, you have yet to win a World Series. Now, they had some of these guys together. Ichiro, Ken Griffey Jr., they played together for a little bit. Well, for a year. They had Randy Johnson with both of those guys. Ken Griffey Jr. in particular. They had Felix Hernandez with Ichiro for a while. These are some of the best players of their generations. Randy Johnson's one of the best pitchers of all time. Felix Hernandez was one of the best pitchers of about 5 years. Ken Griffey Jr. and Ichiro are both top outfielders in the history of the league. And you couldn't do anything with any of that talent? That's insane. Then you have the Alex Rodriguez and David Ortiz situations. Both of those guys, Rodriguez and Ortiz, actually spent time in the Mariners farm system, but they gave up on them. Rodriguez did make it to the big leagues for the team, and he had a couple years there, but everyone forgets about that. Ortiz, they traded him as a player to be named later. So, I mean, it makes you think, if they would have kept both those guys, how could this team have actually won something? And then you have the Kevin Mather. Now, Mather, obviously, he's the GM that recently stepped down after some controversial comments came out. So, obviously, he was manipulating service time. Obviously, the team was okay with him manipulating service time, among other things. So, yeah. Lastly, we have the Texas Rangers. Now, the Rangers are a team that I don't necessarily have any hard feelings for. Just constant underachievement. In the early 2010s, this team would always make the World Series, it seemed, but they could never win the World Series. So I kind of felt bad for them. But, now they're just constantly underachieving. They have this beautiful stadium where, of course, the 2020 World Series was played, but they weren't a part of it. So they just constantly disappoint every year, time and time again. Alex Rodriguez. Yep, if you had Rodriguez, he's a bullet point for you. Now, I mean, I understand Rodriguez wasn't this amazing, the head case that he was in New York while in Texas, but he was still a head case, don't get me wrong. Rodriguez did a lot of things wrong. Rodriguez was, what he was. He took all this money and he was good, but the Rangers couldn't afford to keep him and have a good team. And lastly, we have the Rangers' involvement in 10-cent beer night. This is not on them. They were not the host of it, and we will get to that when we get to Cleveland in the near future. But you were involved in this, and you guys basically were mugged and attacked to an extent. So I had to mention it. It's just one of those moments in history that makes you think, wait a second, in 1974, beer was 10 cents? No, that was incredibly cheap, and that was the problem. So Rangers, again, I don't have a lot to say about you. Now I have one good thing to say for each team. Texas Rangers, I mean, you guys have had some very good pitchers in the past, and Nolan Ryan, is still involved in the organization. Nolan Ryan's one of the best players of all time, so I do like Nolan Ryan. So I like how he's still involved with the team. Seattle Mariners, a lot of people I know are big fans of Ken Griffey Jr. I do remember, of course, when he retired, because that was in 2010, but I never really got to watch him because he was never on national TV because Seattle was never good. But a lot of people I know like Ken Griffey Jr. So, Oakland Athletics, I mean, you guys have some of my, a couple of players that I've liked in their history. Ricky Henderson's one of my favorite players. Current day, you have Matt Olson, who's probably one of my favorite first basemen in the league. So, you have some good players, and I hope that you get your stadium situation figured out sooner rather than later. Angels, when I was in high school, I did own an Angels ball cap. So I clearly do like the Angels to an extent, but it's mostly because I love Mike Trout. And, he's from the Philly area, Millville. So, yeah, he's definitely an Eagles fan. But, I love Trout. And now they got Shohei Ohtani, who's a guy who I was high on immediately. Now I'm really happy about Ohtani. So you've got players I like. And you have a World Series. So it's always good. But anyway, that was the AL West. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And again, the Houston Astros video will be out shortly. Have a good rest of your day.